Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Technology is being kind to us this evening, so we're going to get started. I would ask that you rise. First call to order the September 21st, 2022 meeting of the Council of the City of Springdale. I would ask you to rise for the pledge and remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
God of beauty and of song, heal the world of grievous wrong. Lift our hearts and let us pray for a freer, nobler day. Let war die upon the earth, let world brotherhood have birth. And within the hearts of men, let love blossom once again. God of beauty and of song, heal your world of grievous wrong. Amen.
Amen. Hi, Ms. McNear, you do roll call.
Mr. Anderson?
Present.
Mrs. Gantes? Here. Mr. Hawkins?
Present.
Mr. Jacobs?
Present.
Mr. Ramirez?
Present.
Mrs. Sullivan-Weiscott?
Present.
Mr. Vanover?
Present. All right, Council, we don't have minutes ready yet, so we'll jump into committee and official reports. And first off this evening is our always favorite Mr. Coleman on civil service.
Thank you, Mr. President. Moving a little slower this evening as a result of knee injury. I think it was brought on by the visit to the rec department, of which Mr. Vanover was present as well. But be that as it may, I'll move on. Civil Service Commission did meet on September the 1st, and all members of the commission were present, along with Assistant City Administrator Brian Yule and the Human Resources Administrator Stephanie Morgan. Excuse me. What seems like a never-ending revolving door for employee turnover, there is progress that is being made. I would like to report on the status of the following processes that were discussed at that meeting for an update. First of all, the Firefighter 2, EMT, and Firefighter 2 paramedic hiring process. There were 12 interviews conducted for the positions, and 2 candidates were selected. So we're right on target for the vacancies in the fire department area. The next item was the police clerk hiring process. There were 8 interviews conducted, and 1 individual was selected. So again, we're moving forward in that direction as well. Within the building department, the administrative assistant, that hiring process, there were 83 total applications received. And from those applications, 8 interviews were conducted, and following the interviews, 1 individual has been selected and I think has completed the background process as well. So again, that's moving forward as well. The next item was the tax account clerk, that hiring process. There were 22 applications received for that position, but because of some anticipated vacancies, actually I think there was a resignation that occurred somewhat unexpectedly. 2 of those candidates have been selected from the 22 applications. So again, that process has moved forward as well. Within the building department, the maintenance inspector hiring process, there were 27 total applications received for that position. 8 candidates were selected for interviews, and the interviewing process is still ongoing to my knowledge. I don't think they've been finalized yet, but again, it's moving forward. And then the recreation programmer hiring process, 24 applications have been received. 6 interviews were scheduled for last week, and 1 of the candidates has accepted employment elsewhere, and so there are now 7. There were 7 selected and 6 interviews. But like I said, 1 of the candidates had accepted employment elsewhere. I talked to Charlie Wilson earlier today, and he said they were pretty much getting pretty close to finalizing that process. The custodian hiring process, the applications are currently being reviewed, and hopefully that will conclude very shortly. I think that kind of completes. Nope, there's some other items here. The tax account clerk job description was reviewed, and following that review, a motion was made to approve the new job description. That motion was seconded and unanimously approved 3-0. There's a list of positions that are exempted positions from testing, and in an effort to keep the process moving forward, administration will be allowed to bypass the request to the commission to get approval for these exempted positions, therefore moving the whole process forward a lot quicker. So rather than come to the Civil Service Commission to seek approval to waive the testing, we will have a list of positions so that we'll know that those positions are exempted, and there'll be no need for the testing, and be based on actual skills and the interview itself. And patrol officer in the police department. Due to an unexpected resignation in the police department, the current patrol officer hiring list is still in effect. So we caught a break there, and therefore we're able to use that list to consider filling that vacancy as opposed to starting from scratch there. So as you can see, been busy. Administration has been busy. Brian and Stephanie Morgan been doing yeoman's work in order to keep things moving forward, in order to get the vacancies taken care of. We appreciate everything that they do. They come to us, us being the Civil Service Commission, to keep us updated. We provide guidance and direction in order to accomplish the end objective, and so we're pretty happy with things moving forward. Yeah. That concludes the report.
Mayor Webster?
Yeah, Mr. Coleman, you alluded to this exempted list. I know I asked the commission probably 20 years ago to create that. So are you referring to that list? Have you added to that list, or I wasn't sure what you were
We still have
referring.
that list, and we're adding some positions to
Oh, you
that
added
list.
some positions to that exempted list? Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
and what we did is identify the dates where they were first acknowledged as being exempt, and therefore we'll know from looking at the dates what was newest and what is more recent. But
Okay.
yeah, that list is still in effect. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, that's got it. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Get better. Rules and laws, Ms. Gantes.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report.
Okay, Finance Committee, Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report.
All right, Planning Commission, Ms. Weisskopf.
Thank you, Mr. President. Planning Commission met on September 13th. We had two things. We had a minor modification to a PUD final development plan for Vertex at 1120 Strategic Parkway, Suite 300. It's basically building 2, everything except for Amazon. That's that big building, and they needed to do enclosures for an air gas tank, and then an enclosure over trash and things like that, and generators. And that passed with a 7-0 vote. And then we had a zoning map amendment, planned unit development, and a final PUD at 111 Tri-County Parkway for Hamilton County 911 EMA facility. And after a bunch of discussion, that also passed with a 7-0 vote. Do you have anything to add? That's all we have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Board of Zoning Appeals, Ms. Gantes.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report.
Okay, Board of Health, Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. President. Board of Health met on September 8th after the summer hiatus. There's 2 big successes to talk about. They've completed the accreditation process after 5 years. And it was an immense effort, and the commissioner wanted to especially thank our public health nurse, Amy Ellis, Deb Boggs, Charles Noble, and they talked a lot at the meeting about these 3 interns that must have been fantastic, because Commissioner Clayton brings them up all the time, and they made a great impression on everyone. I think it's worth mentioning that Springdale Health Department is one of the smallest in the state, and we're probably the smallest to get accredited. A lot of other communities disbanded their health departments after that accreditation requirement popped up. And so I think a great decision was made to keep our health department. The other success is the summer health program. They had everything from mental health fairs to mammography screenings. They put together a fantastic health magazine, which I forgot to bring the hard copy with me tonight, but it's online, springdale.org. Click through the Board of Health to get these fantastic resources, everything from like warning signs for colon cancer, and then dozens of other tip sheets, and it's just really digestible. So anybody can benefit from that. Again, on the springdale.org website, just click on Board of Health. As far as COVID goes, numbers are still low or on a decline. There's no more quarantining after exposure. For example, the latest booster is available for the latest variant. So if you've had the initial round of shot with a booster followed by another booster, and if at this point you could get that 4th shot. And there was discussion about how that's recommended, especially for people that might have what they've always called comorbidities. And clinics are available almost every Thursday from 9 to 12:45 here at the municipal building. During the meeting, they had a supply of Pfizer's newest booster. At the time, they didn't have a supply of Moderna yet. They were still waiting on that. And then just kind of a miscellaneous fashion, they talked about updating regulations for food service vendors, swimming pools, spas, and hotels and motels. They update the fees on a regular basis just to stay in line with other communities. So that got a reading. And then there was a quick discussion about just the topic of hotels in general in the city. We got some real solid operators, and then we've got some hotels that are becoming problematic. And so there's a beginning discussion of maybe ramping up some enforcement to try to deal with some of those repeat issues from certain local hotel operators. Unless there's any question, that concludes my report.
Don't see any lights. Thank you, sir. Capital improvements, Ms. Gantos.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report.
All right. OKI, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I love OKI, so here we go. OKI did meet on the 9th of this month, and there was 2 items that I think this group would benefit from hearing based on the work that's going on right now in our community. We had a presentation from the Cincinnati Crown Group. If you're not familiar, that's a group, it's a public-private partnership that's been working to do a bunch of bike and cycle multi-use trails in the city, connecting communities inside of there. It doesn't quite reach up to us, but certainly there's trails that do, like Little Miami, Connect Gardens, things that we're looking at. It was interesting because they just now made a substantial change. They just completed the Wasson Way connector, which has been needed for a couple years now, and then they just opened another connector connecting the Little Miami bike trail to Lunken. That path is opening up, I think, yesterday or today?
Yesterday.
Yeah, and which is pretty exciting for people that are into that sort of thing. So that was a good segue into another presentation they gave at OKI related to 2 big tranches of funding that the administration, I'm sure, is aware of already, but wanted to make sure that we knew was out there. They were pushing. One is the Safe Streets for All initiative. There's about $200 million annually for the next 5 years available. That one requires a 50% match from the local community. And that's for connecting and making these infrastructure improvements like what we've been talking about with the multi-use bike trail and things like that. The other item they highlighted for funding is part of the infrastructure bill that went through the federal government. There's about $1 billion annually that's been set aside already for the next 5 years, and that one only requires a 20% match, but that's a national program. The first one was Ohio only. This is nationally. There's $1 billion with a 20% match. Part of that infrastructure bill. OKI is offered to help with applications. They don't administer that, but they have some experience getting those grants, and they wanted to make sure that cities knew that they're available to help with those applications as well. The reason that's so timely is one of the things they highlighted again and again in those presentations is it's very important. It's a prerequisite for funding requests to have an approved, a proper approved multi-use pedestrian safety plan in place before you can apply. Which is exactly what we've been working on for the past several months with the contractors, KPI. So as soon as that's done, we're certainly eligible to apply for those grants. Some of that work is expensive. It's like $1 million a mile for some of these if it goes across bridges. So it's good that that's available. The 2022 date for applications for that first year of grants was actually earlier this month, which we weren't in a position to deal with. But we have plenty of time to get ahead for the next set of applications. So those are available online, and if people need more information from it, I'm happy to give it. But with all the feedback there, I think it's great to identify this funding, because that's what people are asking for, what we need. So that's two big buckets available to us. The
Mayor Webster?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple things. First off, we had a meeting a couple weeks ago with the folks from Metro, and well, there's some exciting things coming down the pike, and they're announcing a new service called Metro Now, I believe it's called, and this will, I think, November, what's the scheduled date? Wasn't for this service, but anyway, it will be, if you want to take a bus, if you live in Springdale, and you need transportation to someplace else in Springdale, you can call, there'll be an app for your phone, get in touch with Metro, they'll have a bus at your door within 15 minutes, cost you $3, take you anywhere in Springdale, drop you off. How you get home, so you're on your own. No, you just reverse the same thing. I'm assuming it'd be $3 coming back. But as long as it's in the Springdale district, and we're going to be a pilot community for it, and assuming it's successful here, it'll get rolled out throughout Hamilton County. But this is one of the benefits that we were deriving from the property tax levy that passed, I guess it was last November. And we're also going to introduce some new service. I think it's Route 65, I believe. But anyway, it's bus service every half hour up and down Kemper Road, Northland Boulevard, and Kemper Road. And this is really going to be great for Artesian Village. And hopefully there's going to be maybe a hub over there for the buses. We're still negotiating that. But I think there's really some exciting things going to be happening in the metro world in the next year here. So, and the only other thing I have is this afternoon we had our first SOS meeting of the season, and needless to say, one of the primary topics was our Christmas program. So I know it's early to start talking about Christmas, and you're tired of hearing me talk about it already, I'm sure. But too bad, you're going to hear it anyway. So anyway, if you're so inclined to help us, we certainly appreciate it. Last year I think we helped 90 families, over 200 children benefited from the program, and so we're open for business. So we're hoping to have even more families being helped by SOS this holiday season. So that concludes my report. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay. Ms. McNair?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mayor, question about the bus. They're going to pick up only on Kemper and Kemper Road, or are you saying they're going to actually go to houses? Your house? As that makes me wonder about the parking issues that we have where cars are blocking some of our streets, like the cul-de-sacs. Are they going to be able to get buses down there, or is it going to be a small?
These will be mini buses.
Mini
They
buses,
won't be
okay.
big 30-passenger buses or
Okay.
anything.
All right, great.
Probably 6 or 8 passengers, I would think.
Thank you.
Okay.
You know something about it, Jeff?
Oh, I was just going to share, I believe they're actually planning to have not just mini buses, but also some automobiles that they would be using with Metro drivers for that NOW program that we're piloting. It's not just the big buses, it's those smaller ones and then also cars. And it's really designed for that last mile and first mile in addition, so they're looking at expanding it for that too. The Metro Now is different. There's also a separate program for first mile, last mile, to get people to these like stations that the mayor was speaking of, that if we build these smaller depots, then they don't have to run buses everywhere to go east-west. You can get that car request, they'll take you to the station and then go from there.
Thank you.
So they're digging in. It's going to be interesting.
All right, Clerk, Counsel, Finance Director, Ms. McNair.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't have a report for this evening. I will have one at a subsequent meeting. But I do want to make a comment and thank Mr. Hawkins for filling in for me at the last meeting. So thank you very much.
I always miss you when you're gone.
All right, Administrator's Report, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. Brian will also have a report this evening. We've got several things tonight. Document shredding, Saturday, October 8th at 9:30, and that will run till 12:30, and that is at the Community Center parking lot. We also have the SYB's Father-Daughter Dance fundraiser, Saturday, October 8th, from 6 to 8. 80s and 90s music is apparently the dance theme, and tickets are available at the community center. Winter sports registration for both basketball and cheerleading. Now I'm moving to the police department's report. On September 18th, the police department conducted sobriety checkpoint in conjunction with Hamilton County and the OVI, as part of the OVI task force, and they worked with multiple other agencies. That location was on Springfield Pike, and it ran from 9 to 11. They dealt with 520 cars, and as they listed, the operators were educated about what was going on. There were 3 citations written, and they were written for no operator's license, possession of marijuana, and open container. The reason why they focused on that particular area is during the period from 9/9/21 to 9/9/22, there were a total of 90 arrests for OVI within a 1-mile radius, and 86% of those arrests were by our police department. And the only other thing I would add, in addition to Mr. Coleman's report, is hiring part-time for fitness instructor, maintenance worker, custodian, and customer service representative. If interested, contact our HR administrator, Stephanie Morgan. Thank you.
Mr. Yule?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick update on behalf of the building department. I just wanted to let council know that the building department will be discontinuing their contract with IBI. We will be engaging in a new contract with NIC, which is the National Inspection Corporation, to conduct electrical inspections for our residents and our commercial establishments. So Mr. Lamping will be preparing a new fee schedule here in the next few weeks, and we do anticipate a new fee schedule coming before council here at a subsequent meeting, probably towards the end of the year. So that's the end of my report.
Not soon enough. Law Director's report, Mr. Braun.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report tonight.
Engineers report, Mr. Riggs.
My report will be pretty brief this evening. Starting with the Northland Boulevard Reconstruction project, we initially met with Public Works on August 15th to discuss our initial findings for the shared use path alternative. After that, we got some feedback and further direction from Public Works, and we submitted a revised findings report to Public Works on the 9th, September 9th, and we're hoping to meet with them as early as next week to get their thoughts on that and finalize the report and recommendation. The Kemper Road CSX Bridge project, the construction contract was advertised on September 1st, and the bid opening is actually going to be held here tomorrow at 2 o'clock. And the State Route 4 urban paving project, final plans are planned to be submitted to ODOT on October 3rd. And that's all I had.
Just a quick question, because I've gotten a couple. Crescentville Road, construction, what's the time window left on that?
Right now, they should be almost, if not complete with the water installation, the water main. So the road work is continuing. I believe at the schedule, I think they're on pace to meet the schedule, and I think it was going to be, was it September of next year? I have to look at my notes here. July of next year.
July, okay.
But a lot of the utility work is still ongoing, some of the overhead relocations, but the water main is near completion.
Well, I know the water main and the gas line,
Yeah.
They've been working on, plus in the neighborhoods too, because they're replacing gas feeds from the street up to the house.
Right.
So, okay, appreciate it. And the new kid on the block, the rental program committee, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. The rental program committee did have its formation meeting on 8/31. We also met again on 9/14 for a follow-up meeting. In that formation meeting, we did identify the primary issues that we should start addressing. So for people who weren't there or hadn't heard, it really broke down into two major categories of work that we think we need to dig into. As Mr. Vanover in the discussion here in that meeting prior talked about, it's really around property maintenance and then traffic and parking. And there's really a third leg too we talked about at the second meeting around community engagement and civic pride. Between those three areas, the committee has started to identify issues inside of it. And we're trying to work, we're working with the law director and also the city departments to identify action plans and ordinances that we can use to update those. A couple interesting things that came out of the meeting, especially in that space, is I know I didn't know that. I know it's a lot. In Heritage Hill, for example, there's 25% of the houses there we believe are rentals that we know of. These are ones that have been identified as rentals, so 1 out of 4. I think that's interesting. Other areas of Springdale, it's lower, but it's still a substantial part. So we need to make sure that we've got our hands around it because that doesn't seem like something that's changing anytime soon. One of the things that's important to note with it is the work that we're doing, we think will go beyond just the rental program, rental houses alone. Just tonight, we talked about how the health department's concerned about some of the changes with hotel motels and how those can become problems around maintenance and health codes. Ms. McNair mentioned the traffic and parking problems with the busing. These are all related to the same thing. So while the committee was charged with dealing with the rental programs, we really think the scope is a little broader than that. We'll keep our focus there, but just anticipate as we bring recommendations to all of council, it'll affect more than just rentals. And with that in mind is why our action plan is set right now, is we're expecting to come up with some, at least some initial action to address the property maintenance side of things. In our next meeting, we're going to review that. That's slated for October 12th, where we're hoping to have something we can look at and start talking about. The reason that's important is after we get that initial stab, our intent is to go beyond just the committee and take it to the public as well. So we're anticipating scheduling a public engagement meeting of some sort to show the community at whole that we are seeing this kind of change in the way buildings and properties are being maintained, and we want to make sure that we've captured all of the issues. And then also if the residents have ideas on things that we can do to address them, we want to make sure we capture those too. So that's really just to put a placeholder in your minds. If you're talking to people about building issues, that there'll be an opportunity probably in November to come in and talk with this committee and identify issues and take a look at what we're doing to see if it addresses it. I know just this week there was an issue in my neighborhood that generated a lot of calls about how a house was being used, and it was very timely that I could tell them, hey, we're aware of this sort of thing, not just for parking, but property maintenance. So I think it's exciting, and we got a good start. We've had 2 meetings. We'll have another one October 12th.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, communications. Ms. McNair, are there any communications this evening?
Nothing this evening, Mr. President. Thank you.
All right, at this point, I will open the floor for communications from the audience. Caveat, we have 2 public hearings, so if you're addressing a topic there, hold it because there will be a place for that. And if there's comments about the rec center discussion, hold it. When we get to that point, we will have discussion there. So with that said, communications from the audience, anybody I'd like to address or address council for any reason? Second call. Third and final call. We'll close communications from the audience. And at this point, we'll go into ordinances and resolutions. And first off this evening, we have ordinance number 28, 2022. Ms. McNair, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 28, 2022, an ordinance amending Chapter 153 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Springdale, Ohio, related to the operation of peer-to-peer car-sharing programs in the City of Springdale. Whereas Ohio Revised Code Chapter 4516 addresses regulations regarding peer-to-peer car-sharing programs, and whereas the City of Springdale, the city, seeks to adopt additional regulations regarding the location and operation of peer-to-peer car-sharing programs in the city. Now therefore be it ordained by the council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, Chapter 153 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Springdale shall be amended as provided for in the attached Exhibit A, which is incorporated herein by reference. Section 2, council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this legislation were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 3, this ordinance shall take effect on the earliest date allowed by law.
All right, there is a public hearing attached to this ordinance, so at this point I will open the floor for communication or comments, either for or against. on ordinance number 28, 2022. Mr. Braun, do you have anything to add?
No, I would just point out that this has been through multiple reviews by a couple committees, and this was a matter that was brought to council by the public, and I think it's a good resolution for the members of the public that brought that to our attention.
Floor still open. Second call. Third and final call. We'll close the public hearing. Council, this is the second reading of ordinance number 28, 2022. It can be enacted upon this evening. What
Move
is
to
your
adopt.
pleasure?
Second.
Motion second. Discussion. Seeing no lights, Ms. McNeil, you poll council.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mrs. Sullivan Weisskopf?
Aye.
Mrs. Gantos? Mr. Hawkins?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Ramirez?
Aye.
And Mr. Vanover?
Aye. Ordinance 28, 2022 passes with 7 affirmative votes. Next up, we have ordinance number 29, 2022. Ms. McNeil, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 29, 2022, an ordinance approving a major modification to the Springdale Commerce Park Plan Unit Development for the property located at 1145 Strategic Parkway. Whereas the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, Council, has previously approved the Springdale Commerce Park Plan Unit Development PUD, and whereas the applicant has submitted an application for a major modification to the PUD located at 1145 Strategic Parkway, allowing for a modification to be made to the overhead door on the east side of the Building 3 associated with the operation of Sugar Right, which manufactures liquid sugar. And whereas at its meeting of August 9th, 2022, the Planning Commission recommended approval of the proposed major modification. And whereas a public hearing was held by council on September 21st, 2022, pursuant to the requirements of the zoning code. Now therefore be it ordained by the council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, the major modification to the Springdale Commerce Park PUD associated with the modification to the overhead door on the east side of Building 3, which has been reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission in accordance with the attached Exhibit A, which is incorporated herein by reference, is hereby approved, subject to the conditions of the Planning Commission. Section 2, that this council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this ordinance were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 3, that the Clerk of Council Finance Director is hereby authorized and directed to notify the applicant of council's action. Section 4, that this ordinance shall be effective from and after the earliest period allowed by law.
All right, thank you, Ms. McNair. We will open a public hearing associated with this ordinance, and I open the floor for comments either for or against. Mr. Lamping, do we have a short presentation or comments?
I have not presented, except for the handouts, I have not presented.
Okay, all right. Anybody else like to address on this public hearing? Second call. Third and final call. We'll close the public hearing. Again, council, this is the second reading and can be enacted upon this evening. What is your pleasure?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion second. Discussion. Mayor Webster?
Yes, I just have a question. Thank you. I have a question for Mr. Lamping. Were the people on Ledro notified of the public hearing tonight?
Yes, sir.
They were?
I had the public notice requirements 15 days ahead of this meeting. Postcards went out, and we had signs at the property.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr. President. And I just want to confirm the hours or the time frame for the time in which it's permitted, what those are going to be.
Hours of operation or hours of
I'm
use
sorry,
of this store?
my fault.
The hours for truck access, I know the ordinance references Exhibit A, but Exhibit A is referencing that the staff's comments, there needs to be consideration for it, so I just wanted to confirm what the timeframe was.
The conditions of the approval or recommendations of approval from Planning Commission included the frequency per week for the truck access on the east elevations, the hours permitted for the truck access, the doors remain closed with the exception for the compactor servicing. The hours were 8 to 5, I think the numbers were that the planning commission noted.
Okay. Do we need to have that incorporated some kind of way, either in the exhibit specifically or in the ordinance? Because we don't, there's nothing, unless there's something that I'm missing through there in Exhibit A. It just references that the frequency per week for the truck access and the hours are going to be limited. And so if we don't specifically reference it, I don't know, unless there's something else that's going to incorporate, how it's going to be something that they have to adhere to. Unless there's something I'm missing, I'm just,
That'd be covered under the covenants.
Would be the hours that we agreed for the whole PUD to have truck access, I thought.
okay. So you think
I
just
wasn't at
based
that
off of
meeting,
the,
but I'm assuming.
I just want to make sure, because it's not in the ordinance specifically, it's not in Exhibit A specifically, so I just want to make sure that it's covered so that if someone's not doing what they're supposed to, we've got the ability to enforce that.
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you. That got addressed. The answer was yes, it's in the covenants.
Okay.
Is that, I know I'm asking,
Oh,
is that, I didn't hear an answer.
Well, Ms. Weisskopf?
Sorry.
You wanna
Sorry.
respond?
I
Jump
was
in
not at this meeting when we discussed this, is when I had COVID, but when we originally did the original PUD, I thought that that was covered under everything when we were going through the times that trucks were allowed and not allowed. I thought that we had specified a time that, Mr. Ramirez, do you remember if we specified the truck hours when we originally did the original PUD? I believe that we did. It is my assumption. I don't want to say for sure because I don't have it in front of me. But I'm pretty sure we did when we first did the PUD.
I believe we did address.
Because it was a big discussion about the trucks coming in at different times, and I remember that all the residents of the crossing were very, very particular about that when we were talking about that as well, so, if I remember correctly.
I'm gonna say yes, we did, and I know we did not bring it up again, the allowed times for the trucks to come in.
Mr. President, if I can just finish, as long as the administration feels comfortable with regard to we have a means in terms of Mr. Lamping and Mr. Braun to enforce it, I'm fine with that. When I read the ordinance, I read Exhibit A, we didn't have the actual date, the times and days. I just want to make sure we're
I
covered.
understand your point clearly. It would have been excellent if we would have had that in there, but I believe that based on the planning commission's actions and documentation, we have the ability to enforce that.
If you guys are good, I'm good.
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you. If that's closed, I have a different topic, a different question related to the sidelines and visibility. The feedback I've been getting from the development is that some of the landscaping that is in the diagram and shows here that affects the visibility doesn't seem like it's doing well, especially on the Crescentville side, and that now we're adding additional things that really should be screened. I know that's typically an enforcement issue. Could you share, have they been receptive to corrective action so far? Because I know the picture shows mature, but what's on this picture isn't what's on the street.
The landscaping for Springdale Commerce Park on both the east and the north side, which is Crescentville and the Heritage Hills subdivision, is the easiest word to use is depressed, meaning the plants aren't growing very well.
Yeah.
And we have been out there to inspect them, and we have given them a corrective plan that they have to address, and they're in the process of addressing it this fall when it is the best time to address these. In fact, the buildings 1 and 4 are being designed for approval right now, and some of the issues that we have with the screening and drainage specifically, they're addressing with the new construction documents. Outside of the construction of the building, they're going further and addressing stormwater issues that we're having with neighbors. And so, to answer your question, yes, they are being very receptive to issues being brought up to them.
Okay, that's good to hear, because if they were dragging their feet and wanted another exception, I would have a real problem with that, but it sounds like you can work with them.
In my opinion, I can call them up and things happen, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Webster?
Is there anyone here from Sugar Right?
Yes.
Do you know, sir, has there been any restrictions placed on you in what hours that you guys could use this dock?
On the east side door?
Yeah.
No. I mean, we presented that we would only use it during daytime hours. couple times a week, as stated by Mr. Lamping, between 8 and 5 roughly. I mean, it is, it is just for taking material out of the building with a dumpster or compactor, if you will. So, I mean, their operation hours will be limited to, you know, daytime hours.
I mean, you're taking stuff out of the building and put it into a truck, I'm assuming, or a dumpster or
No,
something?
it's basically a roll-off dumpster. So they'll back into the building, pick up the roll-off, and drive away.
And that will be done during the day?
Yes.
And that's spelled out in the covenants? Is that spelled out in the covenants that this will be a daytime
To
operation?
my knowledge, it's not spelled out in the covenants. It was part of their submittal as it was to be used, as this new door was to be used during the daytime.
Okay, well, let me ask you a question. As a chief enforcement officer in the building department, if they do it in the middle of the night, do you think you've got the proper documentation to take them to task on that?
As I stated earlier, I wish it was better to address the initial comments, but yes, I think I can enforce it this way. Based on the cooperation I've had with the property owner, I believe I can.
Would you feel better if council put an amendment to the ordinance?
It would help, yes, sir. If it's easy to do, yes, sir.
I would respectfully ask council to consider that.
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you. It's a separate topic since we have Mr. Sugarwright. If you're done with that item, at least pending this.
Well, I tell you.
Do you want to do the,
Yeah,
do
let's.
you want to finish that first?
Figure on this. Ms. Weisskopf?
Thank you. I would like to amend the ordinance 29/2022 to add into exhibit under the page 3, part 4, where it says hours permitted for truck access. It's 4B. I want to put between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m.
Mr. Hawkins?
I'll second.
Thanks, man.
Just to the applicant, that works?
Yes, sir. I
Okay.
mean, most waste haulers aren't 24/7.
Right,
so
right.
It'll be Monday through Friday, daytime hours.
Okay. Well, we have a motion to amend and a second. Is there any other discussion on the motion to amend? All right, Ms. McNear, you poll council on the motion to amend and the
Mrs.
amendment.
Mrs. Sullivan Weisskopf?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mrs. Gantes? Aye. Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Ramirez?
Aye.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye. Motion to amend is passed with 7 affirmative votes, so the hours of operation are amended to be 8 to 5. We still have discussion, Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. Separate question. I'm glad you're here to answer it because it might be specific to your operations. I know we mentioned the liquid storage container. The question I've been getting about this operation is around odor and odor control. Do any of these changes affect, so people are used to driving down I-75 and going across the old Jim Beam plant, and the sweet smells became pervasive. Is there any issue with extending the operations here where the neighbors might run into problems there? Or is this, I don't know enough about liquid sugar to know if there's I know scorched sugar can be really smelly. Is there an issue there that we need to deal with?
No, there are no odors, sweet or otherwise, unless you're in the building. I mean, there's no discharge of any kind, so there won't, nobody would know what we were doing if you weren't in the building.
Okay, that storage tank won't have any odor control problems either that we're talking about adding?
I'm not sure what
Or is that a
storage tank
different
you're
issue?
referring
Maybe I'm
to.
thinking of a different one. But that's fine.
All
Thank
of
you.
our storage tanks are inside the building. Everything is inside the building.
Still in discussion? All right, we've had a motion second. Ms. McNear, you poll council.
Mrs. Sullivan Weisskopf?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mrs. Gantes? Aye. Mr. Hawkins?
Aye.
Mr. Ramirez?
Aye.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye. Ordinance number 29, 2022 passes with 7 affirmative votes. Welcome to Springdale. Okay. And next up, we have ordinance number 30, 2022. Ms. McNear, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 30, 2022, an ordinance authorizing the mayor, clerk of council, finance director to enter into an agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation to provide bridge program inspection services for the city of Springdale. Whereas under Ohio law, the city of Springdale is responsible for maintaining annual inspections of bridges within its boundaries not included on the state or county systems. And whereas the city of Springdale has determined the need to participate in the Ohio Department of Transportation Bridge Inspection Program services, including but not limited to bridge load calculations, scour assessments, bridge inspections, and fracture critical plan development. Now therefore be it ordained by the council of the city of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, being in the public interest, the city of Springdale, the city, gives the consent to the Director of Transportation to complete the above described project. Section 2, the state shall assume and be responsible for any costs associated with the bridge inspection program services incurred by the city and agreed to by the state. Eligible bridge inspection services are described in the consultant scope of services task order contract, which is attached as Exhibit A and incorporated herein by reference. Section 3, the city acknowledges that it will be responsible for the cost of any repairs or other work that is identified from the inspections that the city determines should be completed. Section 4, council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this legislation were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action, were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 5, that this ordinance shall take effect from and after the earliest period allowed by law.
All right, council, for the reading of ordinance 30, 2022, it is a first reading. Is there any discussion this evening? All right, we will see this again. All right, at this point, we'll move into old business. Is there any old business to bring before council this evening? New business? Ms. Weisskopf? Oh, Mr. Anderson?
You're fine. Thank you, Mr. President. Just one item, and this is to think about. I've been reached out to by a couple times now by residents asking if we could take a look at toy, small, micro mobility device and street use for those things. I know we were talking earlier about shared lanes and multi-use paths and things like that. Out of that discussion, there was some conversations about cul-de-sac use for toys and some of our residential street use for some of these, you know, kids roller skating, but also mini bikes and electric scooters and electric bikes, things that we updated with our S22 supplemental update before. But there was some questions on if people are interested in taking a look at some of our local code for how residential streets can be used by families as well. Right now, they're completely restricted. And our definition of what a toy is I think last touched 10 or 15 years ago. So I didn't know if anyone else had heard feedback in that space, or if it's something we should look at or ask rules and law to look at if we need to update that, or just wait until and include that as part of our bike plan conversation. I don't know if people have heard that feedback.
Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr. President. I've heard some discussion on like dirt bikes or pocket bikes.
Yeah.
I'm open to anything. I think, you know, some of what we just did was compliant with the Ohio Revised Code as things sit at the moment. So are you thinking of expanding usage opportunity, or?
Well, I guess I'm thinking more as we prepare for some of these bike trails or mixed-use trails, should we get ahead of some of that too and take a look at our ordinances for specifically residential street use for these devices, and maybe not to, maybe limit it to, you know, those electric bikes, scooters, and those sort of things. Because even if we do an initial set of trails or bikes, the residential people are going to need to get from their houses to it. Our current law prohibits it. So I know one resident got pulled over and had a stern talking to from the police because the mini bike was considered a toy. In other cases, they've been talked about they're more like mopeds, and then they need to be licensed and tagged. There's some ambiguity there with those devices. I just wonder if we want to get ahead of some of that discussion for how those micro-mobility devices will get on our residential streets to some of the main thoroughfares. And we don't have to act on it tonight, maybe it's think about it, but I think if we're going to start doing some work in that space, updating the law to make it clear for families what they're allowed and not allowed to do on our streets, I think would help them, because I feel like it's ambiguous right now. The other place that came up was on a cul-de-sac. A person was on cul-de-sac, and they were having their kids, use roller skates or basketball in a cul-de-sac, which is why people live in cul-de-sacs, right? But technically, they're breaking the law when they do that. I feel like there's probably some language there we can do to not criminalize family activity on residential streets and also make it safe for them, and alert motorists that this might be happening if you get back into our neighborhoods. So.
Mr. Jacobs?
Yeah, I heard the same concern from the same resident about those issues, and my first reaction is if we're undertaking a larger look into connectivity, it makes sense to go ahead with that. But I also think it just needs updated, plain and simple. And so I support at some point looking at that, whether it be rules and laws or other bodies.
Well, yeah, and again, technology has changed, but also I've had a couple instances where quad runners are zipping through the neighborhood. I actually even had last summer, I guess it was, a group of kids basically body slaloming down the hill, which scares the bejesus out of me, because they get hit with oncoming traffic or somebody coming in behind them. They could be, but it probably, with everything else that we're, the connectivity and that, it probably would be a good idea to clarify some of the stuff. So. All right. Ms. Weisskopf.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we go into executive session pursuant to the Ohio Revised Code, Section 121.22G2, to discuss the purchase or lease of property, and pursuant to the city charter to discuss economic development matters.
A motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Discussion? All right, Ms. McNeil, poll council. So, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. If I could just add one question. I know typically in the past, sometimes the stream gets shut down while we're in the meeting. If we're expecting to have conversation after the meeting, are we going to have continued coverage? Yes? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Ms. McNeil, poll council.
Mrs. Sullivan Weisskopf. Aye. Mr. Jacobs.
Aye.
Mr. Anderson.
Aye.
Mrs. Gantos. Aye. Mr. Hawkins.
Aye.
Mr. Ramirez.
Aye.
Mr. Vanover.
Aye. Administration, we anticipate action coming out.
We believe there will be discussion.
Okay. All right. All right. Council is back in session after an executive session, and at this point, council, I will relinquish your confidentiality requirements from the executive session discussion. So with that, we will move to the community center discussion. Mayor Webster, Mr.
Thank you,
Jones.
Mr. President. First off, I'd like to thank all of you for coming out tonight. We, the administration, have just made our recommendation to the City Council regarding the move of the community center over to Artesian Village. This has not been an easy decision to make. We held 2 public engagement sessions where we gathered some very valuable information. We've had numerous meetings, too many to count, with the developers from Texas. In addition, we've engaged the services of not only KZF to do a connectivity study, but also to have all of our other facilities analyzed as to what their shape and how much we need to, what kind of shape they're in, and how much it's going to cost us to bring them up to speed. So we've tried to consider all aspects of this. At times, it was like a Rubik's Cube. Fix one thing, something else is out of kilter. But anyway, in my 24 years in this city as the finance director, and as the last 27 as mayor of the city, I've never made a recommendation to this city council that I thought would not be in the best interests of the city, be it short term or be it long term. And I stand by that again tonight. At this point, I'd like to ask Andy Cushing to come forward and read the statement that we are going to jointly release with the developer as of first thing in the morning, and one that we just shared with City Council in executive session. Andy.
Thank you, sir. During the first quarter of 2022, the City of Springdale and the developer of Artisan Village, the developer, entered into a memorandum of understanding, MOU, relative to a potential relocation of the city's community center into the first floor of the former Dillard's building in the former Tri-County Mall. The general terms of the MOU is that the developer was to fund 100% of the construction costs and then donate the first floor, including the completed community center, which included fitness activities, rock climbing wall, 2 indoor pools, 2 indoor basketball courts, indoor elevated running track, etc., to the city. Following the donation, the city would staff, operate, and fund the ongoing programming and operating costs of the community center. Since the date of the execution of the MOU, both the developer and the city have worked in good faith in an attempt to come up with a design and financial model that would be in the best interest of all stakeholders, yet most importantly, the citizens of the city. During this due diligence period, the developer expended substantial dollars for architect, engineering, and design charrettes and activities, and the city held numerous community gatherings and citizen surveys in an effort to secure input and feedback from the citizens. At the present time, the developer remains committed to donate the community center to the city. However, in an effort to be fiscally responsible, and especially in an environment where interest rates continue to rise, inflation continues to be uncontrolled, and the overall cost of labor continues to expand, both the city and the developer have decided to pause moving forward on this endeavor, as the financial uncertainties could present undue financial risk to the citizens of the city. Notwithstanding the fact that both the city and the developer would like to pursue and conclude this public-private partnership, it has been determined that in an effort to safeguard the assets of both the city and its citizens, that both parties will let the terms of the MOU expire without moving forward on the relocation. The decision does not mean the developer and the city will stop discussion completely on the community center, nor does it adversely affect the redevelopment plans of Artisan Village. Nevertheless, it has been determined that it is in everyone's best interest to press the pause button at the moment. For further information, please contact Andy Kukta at 513-346-3997 on behalf of the city.
Thank you, Andy. However, as conditions change, it may be wise for some future council, future government of this city to reconsider moving the community center over there. But for now, the community center stays where it is. Finances have a way of changing over time, and because we feel that it's not appropriate at this time, doesn't mean that it won't be appropriate in some future time. Several things I think would have to happen for us to reconsider it, but primarily would, just the reason we've agreed to hit pause is strictly financial. We think that we have not lost faith in the development. We think it's a great development, one of the finest things that's ever happened to this city. We got a development company that wants to drop $1.4 billion in this community. There's got to be a lot of good financial fallout from that. And we're looking forward to them having a very, very successful development. And there will be a lot of issues come back before this council as far as funding and permitting and so forth and so on. So you have not heard the last, just because we're not moving the community center over there, you haven't heard the last of the Texas boys. They will be around. Thank you.
All right. At this point, I'm going to jump the table here. We're going to open the floor for communications from the audience on this discussion point. So, floor is open. Second call. Third and final call. Communications from the audience is closed. Back up to meetings and announcements. Ms. Weisskopf.
Thank you, Mr. President. Planning Commission will meet in these chambers on October the 11th at 7 p.m.
Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Board of Health will meet on October 13th at 7 p.m. adjacent to these chambers.
Ms. Gantos.
Thank you, Mr. President. Board of Zoning Appeals will meet on Tuesday, September 27th at 7 o'clock in the chambers here.
Mr. Yule.
Thank you, Mr. President. Civil Service will meet on Thursday, October 6th at 2 p.m. in the council conference room.
Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Rental Program Committee will be meeting on October 12th at, was it 2 o'clock? 2 o'clock here in the Administrative Building in the Conference Center.
All right. Don't see more lights. Before we move to Mr. Hawkins here, I do want to make a quick statement. And this ordeal that we have worked through, there's one thing that just completely disheartened and really crushed my heart that came out was the neighborhoods pitting neighborhoods against each other. I heard several times that people, oh, you know, my kids have walked there, they deserve to walk there. I've lived 40 plus years in Heritage Hill. I have negotiated Crescentville Road, I have negotiated 747, I have negotiated Route 4. And my kids swam, they played baseball, they played soccer. Whatever they wanted to do, we made it. But it just, there's only one other time in our city's history that I felt so disheartened by community reaction. This is up there with it. And I hope that we all, as the development has taken a pause, we all kind of take a pause and take inventory of what we have in this community and that we are all part of this community. And that's the way we will move forward, plain and simple, whether it's Heritage Hill, the Terrace, Old Springdale, Beacon Hills, Oxford Hills, those are all neighborhoods of this city. And they are no more, no less residents. So this is a statement that coming from my heart, my gut, and I believe it needed to be said. We have a chance, a new beginning, and move on, and we've got great things on the horizon that I think we can all be excited about, but I think that we need to take pause over what just happened. If we forget history, we are doomed to repeat it. So hopefully we have learned something from this, and with that, I will be quiet. Mr. Hawkins, we'll go to you for update on legislation still in development.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you review your internal memorandums, item number 1 was addressed with ordinance number 29, 2022, an ordinance approving a major modification to the Springdale Commerce Park Plan Unit Development for the property located at 1145 Strategic Parkway, with an amendment involving the hours of 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Those passed the 7-0 vote. Item number 2 was addressed with ordinance number 28, 2022, an ordinance amending Chapter 153 of the codified ordinances of the City of Springdale, Ohio, to the operation of peer-to-peer car sharing programs in the City of Springdale. That passed the 7-0 vote. Item number 3 was addressed with ordinance number 30, 2022, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and clerk of council finance director to enter into an agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation to provide bridge program inspection services to the City of Springdale, and that was a first reading. All other matters are forthcoming.
Okay, and a recap of legislative items requested for next council meeting.
There will be a second reading with regard to ordinance number 30, 2022, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and clerk of council finance director to enter into an agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation to provide bridge program inspection services for the City of Springdale. There's also a request for an ordinance authorizing the mayor and clerk of council finance director to enter into an agreement with the best contractor for the East Kemper Road CSX Bridge Rehabilitation Project and declaring an emergency, as well as a request for a resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies for 2023. And finally, there's a request for a resolution authorizing the city administrator to file a funding application for the Urban Canopy Restoration Grant funding through the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. And that's it, unless there's anything else from council or the administration.
I have gotten a letter, the recommendation from Planning Commission, a recommendation for approval of Hamilton County EMA Communications Facility. First reading slated October 5th, and second reading and public hearing for October 19th. Administration, we good on everything else?
Yes.
Okay. And with that, we have item 18 before us.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Council's adjourned.